welcome to Planet Earth. It's Saturday. Usually I do this stuff on Friday, but I waited a day. Why? Because it's the anniversary of the Gulf War. Well, the combat started in January of 1991, but everything that sent it in motion started on August the 6th, 1990, when Iraq invaded Kuwait. Now, why did Iraq invade Kuwait? Well, they felt that Kuwait owed them money for holding off Iran all those years, and they also accused them of slant drilling, pulling oil out of Iraq and sending it to Kuwait to sell it there. And of course, the U.S. ambassador to Iraq, April Glaspie, was approached by the Iraqis and asked what would happen if they invaded Kuwait, to which she said the U.S. would have no opinion on an Arab-Arab conflict. Not sure what that means, but the Iraqis apparently interpreted it as a green light, and off they went. And as you could believe, as you notice, the reaction wasn't very good. U.S. sent 200,000 soldiers to Saudi Arabia as a defensive barrier. Then they upped it to 400,000 to go on the offensive. In January of 1991, they gave this Gary Cooper high noon kind of ultimatum: leave. And they didn't leave. 24 hours later, boom, Desert Storm. And you could already tell by his picture, Iraq has already lost. I mean, the Air Force was not that good to start with. Oh, yeah, they had MiG-29s and MiG-31s and MiG-27s, but they know how to fly it. And you saw Top Gun. It's not the plane, it's the pilot. And their pilots had no idea what was going on, whereas ours knew exactly what they were doing. We're blowing things up left and right, and there's really not a lot the Iraqis could do about it. After 40 days, 40 days of bombing, the ground campaign started in earnest. They tried to bill us the 100-hour ground war. There were some raids and stuff going on before. Bush had an election coming up. Well, anyway, after they bombed the living daylights out of Iraq, off they went, and there was a lot of walking, not a lot of fighting, and as you can tell, one guy lost his helmet somewhere along the way, and it was pretty much over before it even started. Yep, that's what a lot of people are doing. A lot of walking around, watching oil wells burn and everything. Notice, if you ever go back, look at the oil prices back then, it didn't go up that much. Yeah, now, you fling a rock at somebody and the oil price goes up about 20%, but anyway, they just walked in, and that was basically that. And of course, they left Saddam Hussein there, which was a very odd way for Americans to end a war. Usually we storm the enemy capital and drag the guy out, but they decided not to do it this time. They said to occupy Iraq would lead to a protracted guerrilla war, which was proven correct in 2003. But the big difference was in 2003, they felt they could occupy the country, and here comes the guerrilla war. Somehow they didn't think that was going to happen. Well, they really got to read up on their Middle Eastern history, man. Of course, D.C. doesn't get a lot right, and only the poor grunts got to suffer all the mistakes. So as you guessed, the war was over pretty fast. We just tore through, and everybody went home. And then immediately after that, they laid off like half the U.S. Army. No Cold War, the war's over. I remember a lot of soldiers were upset, saying, Saddam has his job, how about me? Yep, this guy's standing triumphantly on a tank. A year later, he's probably driving a cab somewhere on Long Island. But, hey, you got the win. What I still don't understand is why they thought in 2003 they could overrun, occupy the country, and nothing would happen. I mean, no offense, CIA, but your record's not that good. CIA would say, well, the stuff we did right you didn't hear about, so I guess it evens up. But some serious screw-ups. Didn't see the Soviet Union collapse coming, and tried to say Iraq wouldn't resist in 2003. I don't know, man. I want my money back. All right, let's talk about Quetzalcoatlus. I can never say this guy's name. Quetzalcoatlus. There we are. This was discovered in the late 70s in Texas, the largest flying animal ever, and that's what they originally thought it looked like. They named it for the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl. Pretty big. Looks like it's flying. It looks menacing, doesn't it? Well, as you can guess, what they thought it looked like in the 70s and what it looks like they think it looks like now, radically different. Back in the 70s, you see a big vulture-looking thing with they got the word nubhead over here, sounding some kind of an insult, right? In the 90s, they think it's a skim feeder. It kind of flies along on the coast and goes after fish and things like this. And now in this decade, in the 2020s, they've kind of changed their conception of this thing. They got the giraffe stork terrestrial stalker. Yeah, it means they think it spent most of its time on the ground, but it seems to have wings, so does it fly around a little bit maybe? Or does it bounce around, spend most of the time on the ground? Why would nature design something that's not that sturdy to be on the ground most of the time? On the other hand, studies have shown that some of the animals it picked off, remains they found near the fossils of this, don't appear to be fish and don't appear to be very large animals. I can tell it's still pretty big. They call it a giraffe stalker. Has it look like a giraffe? But like I said, I keep wondering about those wings, man. If it doesn't fly, why does it have the wings? And if it does fly, it seems kind of big. Are those wings enough to support it? Does it walk around on these four stilt legs over here? That, like I said, doesn't seem sturdy, especially when it lives in the Cretaceous period. And you know who else lives in the Cretaceous period, right? T-Rex, things like that. So, one-on-one fight with a T-Rex, maybe you can poke with your beak there, but I don't know. All you're going to do is make them mad, I think. So it must be able to do some kind of flying. Now, here's where the terrestrial stalker thing comes from. Might have gone after smaller animals. Can walk around. Very hard for a smaller animal to see this thing unless the feet come down in front of it. Do you think maybe it dove off of cliffs or something like that and then went swooping down on things? That's possible. It looks like it could climb. It's a good climber. If we knew a little bit more about the legs and feet. But you know what they say, everything in paleontology is up for discussion. Some people have also hypothesized it was a swamp dweller. All right, that's kind of strange. Why would it be in a swamp? I could see it, hopping around in there looking for fish or smaller animals. Maybe because it can stand still and its feet look like a tree trunk and then reach down and get something with that huge beak. That's possible. And even this rendition, the swamp dwelling Quetzalcoatlus, has wings. So like I said, it must do some kind of flying. Maybe it just does a little bit of flying and spends time on the ground. I don't know. Every design they come up with this thing just doesn't seem to make sense. But it's there. They found it. Not a lot going on in football. I mean, well, there's the UFL's got some reorganization going on. I'll talk about that when they finish up with that. And of course, CFL's off to a good start playing football over there in Europe. But back here, everyone thinks about the NFL. Had the Hall of Fame game. I don't really pay much attention to preseason, but it's always fun to see how many people show up to a game that doesn't count, And it's usually two teams from nowhere near the area. Well, Detroit's kind of close by. Los Angeles Chargers, nah, they're not even anywhere near the area. So they play in Canton, Ohio, over there at the Hall of Fame Stadium. Been there a couple times. Well, the only way I'm getting a Hall of Fame is, paying a ticket, and I've done it twice. So I've done my part. As you guessed, the Chargers won big, 34-7. Again, it's a game that doesn't really matter, but people like to watch. It's a good way to start the year. The only thing I really found interesting about this game, which I didn't even watch because I forgot about it, was the quarterback, Trey Lance. He used to play for the North Dakota State Bison. He's been in the NFL since fifth year, a couple years in Dallas, a couple in San Francisco. Maybe it all turns around for him in Los Angeles. Had a good game, but hey, it was preseason and it's Detroit. So see how it goes. You guys have yourself a fantastic day. Don't you forget to like and subscribe. Point out my many, many errors down there in the comment if you like. And I will see you next time. Das vidanya.